Bible class today is on Job chapter 20. If you would, turn in your Bibles to Job 20, and let's begin. Verses 1 through 3, we have the preface for the chapter. Verse 1. Then Zophar the Naamathite answered and said, this is Zophar's second speech. The second since Job 11 and verse 1. He mentions no opportunity of repentance. He mentions no hope of salvation. This is a dark chapter against Job. Verse 2. Therefore my anxious thoughts make me answer, because of the turmoil within me. Zophar says that his anxious thoughts make him answer. We all need to learn self-control. And certainly Zophar could have resisted the urge to say these words if he so intended. But he says that his anxious thoughts make him answer. And so he says that he must reply because of his turmoil, as he is extremely agitated or disturbed, so he must answer. He must reply, he says. Verse 3, I have heard the rebuke that reproaches me, and the spirit of my understanding causes me to answer. Job finished his speech with a warning for the friends of God's judgment in Job 19:28-29. Zophar responds, given that Job had said that they are in danger of judgment rather than himself. He says that he heard the rebuke that brings him reproach, and his understanding causes him to answer. So here we have the preface, verses 1 to 3. Verses 4 to 11, we have the brief triumph of the wicked. Verse 4, do you not know this of old, since man was placed on earth? Zophar mocks Job. He asks Job if he knew what men have known since man was first placed on the earth. Surely you know this, Job. And so Zophar mocks Job. Verse 5, that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite is but for a moment. Zophar admits that the wicked may triumph. However, he says that the triumphing of the wicked is short. The shout of joy of the wicked is brief, and the joy of the hypocrite only lasts for a moment. Job later disagrees with Zophar in Job 21 and 13. He said, they spend their days in wealth and in a moment go down to the grave. Job used the same term translated joyful shout in reference to his birth. There was a shout of joy because of him being born. Job 3 and 7. Verse 6. Though his haughtiness mounts up to the heavens, and his head reaches to the clouds. And so he says that the wicked, the hypocrite, will perish forever. Here in verse 7. Verse 6, the triumphing and joy of the wicked will be temporary, despite the heights of his haughtiness, his arrogance. He uses the heavens in parallel with the clouds to show the heights of the haughtiness of the wicked. As you read these passages, keep in mind that he has Job in mind. Verse 7. Yet he will perish forever like his own refuge. Those who have seen him will say, where is he? And again, the wicked, the hypocrite, he says, will perish forever, just like his own dung. Again, this is a term for human waste, like we see in Ezekiel 4:12 and Ezekiel 4:15. So, in a crass way, Zophar implies that Job will go down or go away like his own waste. Those who had seen him will ask, where has he gone? He's nowhere to be found. Verse 8, he will fly away like a dream and not be found. Yes, he will be chased away like a vision of the night. And he says the wicked here will fly away like a dream, or be chased away like a vision of the night, like a dream. After waking, we see it quickly vanishes away. Likewise, the wicked will no longer be found. Verse 9, the eye that saw him will see him no more, nor will his place behold him anymore. The man who saw the wicked will not see the wicked again. The eye of man is put for the entire man. The place of the wicked is put for the people of the place. Verse 10. His children will seek the favor of the poor, and his hands will restore his wealth. The situation is reversed. Such not only affects the wicked, but also his family. Zophar says that the children of the wicked will seek the favor of the poor. As the wealth of the wicked is lost, his children, being in poverty, will now need help from the poor. Zophar later speaks of how he was oppressed and how he oppressed and forsook the wicked, or forsook the poor, and took what he did not build himself. Job 20:19. His hands will restore his wealth. Verse 11. His bones are full of his youthful vigor, but it will lie down with him in the dust. The wicked dies prematurely while still full of his youthful vigor. His bones is used metaphorically for his whole body. His youthful vigor will die with him, Zophar says. In verses 12 to 19, we have retribution for sin. Verse 12, though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue. Here's the wicked taking pleasure in evil as long as possible. It is like someone who savors a sweet morsel of food, holding it in his mouth, letting it melt slowly under his tongue. And so though evil is sweet in his mouth, and he hides it under his tongue, verse 13, though he spares it and does not forsake it, but still keeps it in his mouth. And so the wicked spares and does not forsake evil. It is like a man who keeps food in his mouth, and while he should spit the food out of his mouth, he does not spit it out or expel it from his palate. He savors it too much. Verse 14, yet his food in his stomach turns sour. It becomes cobra venom within him. And so, however, at one point, the evil is no longer palatable. It's no longer enjoyable to the wicked man. It is like a man who keeps food in his, again, he keeps it in his mouth too long. First, the evil is like food in his stomach that, while once was sweet, is now sour and is vomited up. The food has turned, and so turns his stomach. Second, the evil is like venom within him. which kills him. What once was sweet is now bitter. We have an English idiom, turn sour, or we might say that something has turned sour. It means to become unpleasant or unenjoyable, unpalatable. The text reads here in the passage, cobra venom, and so the gall of asps, or the venom of serpents. Verse 15, he swallows down riches and vomits them up again. God casts them out of his belly. This is an image of a man who consumes food only to vomit it up again. What a picture. The wicked takes riches only to have the riches taken from him by God. Verse 16, he will suck the poison of cobras. The viper's tongue will slay him. The wicked man will perish in his wickedness. He will die as if he were to suck the poison of cobras. He will die as if the viper were to slay him with his tongue. And so here Zophar again describes the end of the wicked. Let's comment here for a moment on the viper's tongue. The viper's tongue will slay him. As you study the book of Job, there is a lot of poetry in the book. And this is no different. The text, as is in the Hebrew, is literally tongue, just as we have here in our translation. Zophar may be speaking, again, poetically, as in other passages. Perhaps the unique tongue flick of the viper stood for the viper and its venom. If Zophar does think that the venom actually comes from the viper's tongue, then Zophar is incorrect. As we know today that the tongue of the viper does not contain the venom, which is injected by the viper's fangs. In this particular passage, we see how that he speaks concerning the viper's tongue. And so, yes, it's true. The venom is not in the tongue. However, the tongue is unique. The flicking tongue is unique to the serpent, to the snake. And so it may stand for the whole, for the viper and its venom. And so the viper's tongue, you might say the viper's fangs will slay him. Ultimately, it's the poison of the cobras. It's the venom of the vipers that will slay him. And so the viper's venom will slay him. The venom that's injected by the fangs, the venom that's in the snake, in the serpent. And so I think he's speaking, again, poetically in this passage. When you see a flickering tongue, a forked tongue, you think of the snake. Verse 17, he will not see the streams, the rivers flowing with honey and cream. Again, he's, of course, speaking poetically. The wicked will not see the streams or the rivers flowing with honey and cream. I don't know about you, but I've never actually seen a stream or a river flowing with honey and cream. He's speaking figuratively in this poem. The wicked, as described with poetry, will not see prosperity. That's the point. He will not see prosperity. Job later speaks of the days of his prime when he experienced prosperity. Job 29:6, when my steps were bathed with cream and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me. You might be familiar with an often repeated expression in the scriptures describing prosperity. Passages like Exodus 3:8, 17, chapter 13:5, chapter 33:3, and there are many others. A land flowing with milk and honey. Again, the land did not literally flow with milk and honey, but it's a figurative expression of prosperity, the fatness of the land. The wicked will not prosper. So there, that is his point. Verse 18, he will restore that for which he labored and will not swallow it down. From the proceeds of business, he will get no enjoyment. The wicked will lose that for which he has labored or worked. They will be taken from him. Again, look back at Job 20 and 15. Also, the wicked will get no enjoyment for the proceeds of his business. Now, whether this is true or not, this is what Zophar said in his speech. And oftentimes you'll see the friends of Job saying things that may or may not be true. They're true in the sense that this is what they said, but what they actually said may not be, or may be true. That's something to consider as you study the book of Job. And so Zophar's making the point to Job that the wicked will get no enjoyment from his proceeds. His whole argument is based on what in his mind is that the wicked will suffer. However, Job disagreed with that, as we do today in our study. They may, but it's not a certainty in this life. Verse 19. For he has oppressed and forsaken the poor. He has violently seized a house which he did not build. Zophar explains the reason for retribution. First, the wicked oppress the poor. He has crushed or broken or bruised the poor. Second, he has forsaken the poor, who he oppressed. He left behind the poor, only for the poor to grow more and more impoverished. Zophar gives an example of the oppression. He says the wicked violently takes the house of the poor. He then left the poor man to wander without a home. Zophar here makes an indirect charge against Job. He says that Job had oppressed and have forsaken the poor. However, this is not true. Verses 20 to 29, God's swift judgment. Verse 20, because he knows no quietness in his heart, he will not save anything he desires. The wicked knows no quietness in his heart. What does he mean? Well, the heart often represents the seat of our desires, human desires. And the point is that the wicked is never content or satisfied in his heart. Therefore, he will not save or retain or keep any of these things which he desires in his heart. By the way, this word heart may literally be translated as belly. And as we'll note later in the study, it can be translated in a number of different ways, depending on the context. And so one version reads that he knew no commitment in his belly. Again, it's more understandable to say that there's no quietness or no contentment in his heart. He's not content. Verse 21. Nothing is left for him to eat, therefore his well-being will not last. Zophar says that nothing is left for him to eat. The wicked lives in gluttony, taking what belongs to others. Job 20:19. He says that the well-being of the wicked will not last. And so he will not continue to prosper. Again, the triumphing of the wicked is brief, is the argument that Zophar is making. The words well-being here may be rendered as prosperity. Again, the prosperity of the wicked will not last. Verse 22, in his self-sufficiency, he will be in distress. Every hand of misery will come against him. And so despite his self-sufficiency, having wealth and abundance, he will still be in distress, dire straits. Everyone who brings misery will come upon him. Verse 23. When he is about to fill his stomach, God will cast on him the fury of his wrath and will rain it on him while he is eating. The wicked will not be satisfied, and even if the wicked is close to filling his stomach, his belly, God will rain down his wrath upon him while he is eating. What a picture. The term for stomach may be translated again belly, Job 20 and 15. The wicked may try to satisfy the desires of his belly by eating. However, the same term may be translated as heart, as we noted before in Job 20 and 20. He may try to satisfy the desires of his heart, but God's wrath will come upon him. Either way, whether we're talking about a literal belly or stomach, or we're talking figuratively of his heart, we see that Zophar makes the point that God's wrath will come upon him. You've heard of a rain, a shower, and a picnic. You know, you're out to enjoy a picnic, and here comes the rain. Well, in this particular passage, we see Zophar arguing that God's fury would rain down on him even while he's eating. He will not enjoy it for long. Verse 24. He will flee from the iron weapon. A bronze bow will pierce him through. The wicked will flee but not escape. He will face the consequences of his sins. There's the point that he's making. Zophar describes weapons, including the iron weapons and the bronze bows. The bow may be a synecdoche, a part put for the whole. In this case, the bow may be representative of the bow and arrow. And so the bow may be a synecdoche for the arrow of the bow. In the passage, it says a bronze bow will pierce him through. We know that it's not the bow itself that will pierce the man, it's the arrow of the bow. And so this may be a figurative of speech known as a synecdoche, a part for the whole. In this case, the bow put for the arrow. It's the arrow of the bow that will pierce the man through. And perhaps the bow, or part of the bow, is made of bronze. More likely, though, the arrow of the bow is bronze tipped. Later on in verse 25, note the glittering point or arrowhead in Job 20 and 25. So yeah, I think here he's talking about the glittering point of the bronze arrowhead, not the actual bow. It may be that the bow is partially made of bronze, but I think he's speaking of the arrow itself, particularly the arrowhead. Verse 25. It is drawn and comes out of the body. Yes, the glittering point comes out of his gall. Terrors come upon him. This whole scene is terrifying. Here, the arrow of the bow is pulled out of the body. Again, a bronze bow will pierce him through. That is, the arrow, or the bronze tip arrow of the bow, will pierce him through. It is drawn, it is taken out, it's pulled out. It comes out of the body. From the preceding passage, he is fleeing. And so he's likely to have gotten the arrow in his back. And so the arrow pierced his back. Again, the arrow with its glittering point or arrowhead struck his gall. This may refer to gallbladder. And so speaking of his organ, of his body. Anyway, the arrow strikes his body, perhaps his back as he's fleeing, and then terror comes upon him, the terror of death, the thought that he's going to die. Again, all this suggests the brevity of the triumphing of the wicked, that the wicked will cease. Now, ultimately, that's true in the final judgment, but so far as most likely speaking of in this life, which may or may not be true all the time. Verse 26, total darkness is reserved for his treasures. An unfanned fire will consume him. It shall go ill with him who has left in his tent. The wicked man will leave people behind. First, total darkness awaits his treasures. They will be lost to him. Second, a fire unfanned by man will consume him. Fanned by who? By God. He will be lost. Third, it will go ill with him who is left behind. Those who the wicked left behind will be lost too. Now, consider this. It is true that there are often consequences, not only for the wicked man, but for others around him, such as family or friends, neighbors. Verse 27, the heavens will reveal his iniquity, and the earth will rise up against him. The heavens and the earth are described as witnesses against the wicked. The heavens will testify against his iniquity or sin, and the earth will rise up to bear witness against him and his sin. Job has requested that his friends point out his sins, and they are unable to produce. Here in the particular passage, of course, in this chapter, he says all sorts of things that are implied against Job, but nothing direct. And nothing true concerning him and his wickedness. Verse 27. Verse 28. The increase of his house will depart, and his goods will flow away in the day of his wrath. The increase of his house, the house of the wicked, will depart. He says that his goods will flow away. It's like possessions. They're carried away by floodwaters. All that he has will be lost in the day of the wrath of God. And finally, verse 29. This is the portion from God for a wicked man, the heritage appointed to him by God. Here's the point of his speech. He spends these 29 verses, or at least 28, and now at the conclusion, verse 29, saying that this is the portion from God. This is the wicked's lot. This is what he has coming. This is his heritage, his portion, his lot in life. And it comes from God. Let's consider briefly the portion of the wicked. Now, one might fittingly describe the final judgment in a similar fashion as Zophar describes in this chapter. In many ways, the final judgment, the ultimate judgment of man may be described in a similar fashion. However, it is likely that Zophar was speaking only of the judgment of the wicked in this life. And as Job later disagrees, arguing that the wicked do not always suffer. He points out that the wicked often spend their days in wealth before dying without suffering in this life. Job 21 and 13. And we agree with Job. Oftentimes that is the case. Now, the wicked may suffer in this world as a consequence of their sins. However, it's not always the case that the wicked suffer. Sometimes the wicked prosper right up until the time that they die, as Job argues in Job 21 and 13. But know this, the wicked will suffer the judgment, the wrath of God. And in that fashion, we can say, verse 28, that all these things, including the wicked man himself, will perish in the day of the wrath of God. And so he will suffer separate from God in eternity. Well, that's all the time that we have for today's lesson. And we hope that this has been helpful in better understanding Job chapter 20. And Lord willing, next time we'll continue with our study of this book. Thank you for being here today.